So this morning we're on sermon number 4 of Ephesians. 4 of 7, and as I warned you last week, this week we start getting into what does it mean? You see, the writer of Ephesians has spent the first 3 chapters telling us that we are loved and that God has brought us Gentiles into his house. And now the writer begins to tell us, what does that mean? What does that mean for our lives that we are called to? Now, before I start getting too far into this sermon, I must say, and I must remind us all, that we are able to live according to this calling, not by our own will, not by our own abilities, but by the Spirit that God gave us. The Spirit that is guiding us, loving us, directing us, that has filled us, that has been marked on our foreheads now and forever. So as I was preparing this sermon this morning, I had something else come into my mind. Last week I talked about my love for professional wrestling. This week you guys get to hear about one of my other guilty pleasures, and that is sports-related movies. My favorite movie of all time is Rocky, but I love Mighty Ducks. I love Remember the Titans. I love these movies that talk about the underdog that triumphs, overcomes obstacles, or movies that talk about teams coming together to overcome adversity, much as you see in movies like The Mighty Ducks and Remember the Titans. But it's not those movies that came to mind. It's another sports-related movie that some of you may remember the real-life event that it's based upon. This real-life event happened just a little bit before my time. I was born in 1981. The real-life event occurred in 1980. The movie is Miracle on Ice. The sports event that it is based on is the 1980 Olympics. And it follows the story of the 1980 U.S. men's Olympic hockey team. Now, at the time, many of you guys could probably tell me better than I can tell you right now, there was a little bit of distrust, dislike, resentment, maybe even hatred towards the Soviet Union. Especially when it came to Olympic sports, it wasn't us versus them. But it was also guaranteed almost that the Russian team, men's hockey team, would win. They had won the previous 4 Olympic gold medals in men's hockey. They competed together as a team consistently, traveling the world and pretty much decimating the teams that they played against. So it was a given that they were going to win the 1980s medal. But the movie doesn't follow the Russian team. The movie follows the U.S. team. The U.S. team that at the time was made up primarily of college hockey players, not professionals, not people that had spent every waking moment, day in, day out, playing hockey for money, but young men that were in college that were brought together to form the U.S. hockey team. And many of these young men, being from the Midwest, would have played against each other for the college championships for conference games. So they were not used to playing together as a team. Now, as I was reading Ephesians, there was one specific scene from Miracle on Ice that came to mind. It's the scene that occurs after the U.S. hockey team loses their first official game before the Olympics. If I remember right, it's to the Swedish hockey team that they are playing. And the coach is not happy. The coach is actually pretty angry because his players had spent the entire game looking in the crowd, waving at the pretty girls, talking amongst themselves, being individuals, putting their individual interests, wants, needs, and desires ahead of the team. So as any coach does, he calls the team together after the arena has emptied. Now, if you've seen this movie, you know the scene that I am describing. Coach has them get on the ice and line up on one end of the ice and proceeds to do wind sprints, basically. Suicides is what some sports call it. Back and forth, up and down. And these guys did just get done playing a full hockey game. And they're going, and they're going, and they're going. And after each one, when they finish one sprint, the coach blows his whistle and says one word. He says, again. 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 He pauses when he sees that assistant coaches are getting a little nervous about what's going on with the players. And he asks one question. He asks one of the players, who do you play for? And the player rattles off the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers, to which he puts his whistle back in his mouth, blows it, and says, again. And he does this over and over and over again. And then he pauses again when the light starts to get turned off because the arena staff has finished their job. They have cleaned up what they have needed to do, and they're ready to go home. And coach tells them, we'll lock up when we're done, so you can go. And he asks the same question, this time to a different player. Who do you play for? And this player says his university's name. So the sprints start again, and again, and again. You see a close-up of the faces of the actors, but I can only imagine what the real players would look like with sweat pouring down their faces, because they're still in all their hockey gear. Now, I played football in high school. I've had a practice like this. And running sprints and all that padding, you're talking about another 50 pounds of additional weight that you are pulling back and forth. Coach stops again. This time he says the same question. Who do you play for? And one player who has been bent down, doubled over, trying to catch what little breath they can, slowly stands up and says, I play for the United States of America U.S. hockey team. And with that, coach turns around and walks off the ice. And you see the players collapse on the ice, sucking air, trying to praise God that they had not died through this ordeal. And that's the scene that comes to my mind when I think about this letter, this portion of the letter of Ephesians. The very first thing the writer tells us that a life that's being lived out in response to God's love, the first sign of that is unity. One team. Another movie that's called Drumline says, one band, one sound. One voice, one united front. What does that mean for the church, though? You see, in the church, when we start talking about unity, we quickly go from unity into uniformity. Uniformity being that mindset where everyone has to think, believe, talk, act exactly like me. And there is no room for different opinions, even if we get to the same place. We all can agree that things like child abuse is wrong. I don't think there's anyone in this congregation or in most congregations that would not agree that that is wrong. But what ends up happening? We get stuck debating, arguing, pointing out differences, and we get caught up in the debate. The whys, the hows, instead of, okay, we agree this is wrong. Let's have unity around this, and let's do something about it. We all can agree that homelessness is wrong, and no person, especially in the United States of America, should be dealing with homelessness. We all agree with that. But what ends up happening? We start debating about the causes, the whys, the hows. Well, maybe it was their own fault. Maybe it was a systematic issue. Maybe there's drugs. Maybe there's abuse. Maybe there's injustice. Does it really matter? Or does the thing that matters, us uniting together to do something, to address the problem? Now, don't get me wrong. I will sit and I would talk and I would debate. I love to have those debates. I love to have those conversations. Those conversations are important. And we need to take the next step. And we need to place the priority on being united, even when we disagree about the undertone, the undermessage, the reasoning, to do something, to address hunger, to address the societal injustices. And that's what I think we're being told about in this idea of unity. And it's not just those of us who have been called to ministry or rostered leadership, because the writer even addresses that. Well, that's the church's job. That's the people that work for the church should be doing that. The people that work for nonprofits should be doing that. No. We see here in verses 11 and especially verse 12, preachers, deacons, prophets, teachers, evangelists, we do what we do to equip you guys. When it says to equip the saints, we're Lutheran. We're not talking about the Hall of Fame Christians that have been marked with a special blessing. We're talking about all of us. That's who needs to be doing stuff. That's who needs to unite and address the problems of this world, the aching of this world, regardless of political divisions. And I mention political because we all know now in this day and time, we are probably the most divided politically that we have been in a long time. One side will point fingers at the other. I had a conversation on Facebook. Facebook. With my uncle, who is diametrically opposed to me politically. And I think Sister Davia has seen some of these exchanges. And I posted a video earlier this week about how my heart was heavy that on August 1st I was not looking forward to pulling out all my NFL apparel. That used to be only second to Christmas for me. I looked forward to the day that I could pull out all my Dallas Cowboy jerseys, hang them up, start wearing them like a kid at a candy store. I was fired up. I didn't have that feeling this year. And I talked about that. And I gave some of my reasonings. To which, God bless my uncle, who I love dearly, says, "You're wrong. That idea is a stretch to get to that point. Is something that logically may not hold a ton of water," and kind of gives me all the finer points about how I am wrong. But here's the thing. He's not watching the NFL either. Because he has opinions about what's going on. His reason for not watching the NFL is because he's tired of listening to quote-unquote overpaid, whiny millionaires thinking that they're better than everyone else. And through the conversation, at the end of it, I said, let's just take a moment and let's just point out that you and I are doing the exact same thing, but for different reasons. At the end of the day, your reasons are just as valid as mine. So that's the NFL. It's kind of a silly point. Let's take it to a step further. I talked about homelessness. I mentioned a lot of the causes that I have heard. Does it matter? Or does what matters is the fact that there are people on the streets without a roof over their head, or maybe even sleeping underneath a tarp, not knowing where their next meal comes from. That's what matters. Give them food. Give them shelter. Act united. Don't get caught up in the minutia of argumentation, but unite around the cause. I think this is important here, and I'm going a little bit longer than I normally do, because I also think about these bulletin boards, these poster boards, and the conversations I have had with many of you guys. And I so often get a feel that if St. Matthias can truly become united around a specific ministry, a specific need in the community, y'all could do some powerful, amazing things. I have seen glimpses in this congregation that you guys are caring, loving, supporting. And if you can funnel that to one thing and unite about that one thing, and I know none of you guys see eye to eye on everything. I've had enough conversations with you to understand that. But that's not what matters. If ministry to the elderly is going to be your ministry, well, then let's do it. Let's unite around it. That will also address one of the other things I so often hear in conversation. Vicar, I don't have time. Vicar, I don't have energy. Vicar, I just don't know. You know what I see? I see sitting in front of me not a bunch of individuals, but a congregation. A congregation of caring, loving people. A group that when united, not just one person has to shoulder the responsibility, shoulder the effort. Because yes, if one or two people have to carry the whole load, it gets tiring. It wears you down. But if everyone comes together as a team, you guys can do so much. And you guys have been running those sprints on the ice, especially as individuals taking on, having one or two people overseeing everything. Those have been your suicide sprints, and again, and the whistle over and over and over again. So I don't blame you for being tired. I get it. I understand. But if we can stand up and say, we play not just for Jesus Christ and God, but we play for Team St. Matthias, as cheesy as that sounds, that can be a rallying point. And you guys as a team have no limits. Let us move forward in that united spirit. Amen.